Hello, everybody. So we're going to wait for 5 minutes until everybody has had the chance to join, and then we're going to get started. To all the new joiners, we are going to start in 3 minutes. Give people some more time to join in. To everybody who just joined, we're going to wait a few more minutes to just give everybody the chance to join in. To the new joiners, we're going to wait another 2 minutes and then we're going to get started. I see that our keynote speaker, Mr. Andreas Hartl, is also among us. Hello, Mr. Hartl. It's a pleasure to host you here at our event. And we're going to wait a few more minutes and then get started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
All right, so we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to host you today at the last track of the Blockchain in Use conference in our sustainability track. My name is Ricardo. I'm the Vice President at Birdchain and also our DACH region director at Scantrust. And it's a pleasure to host you here today. We have a packed agenda with a lot of content. So we are going to start with a keynote of Mr. Andreas Hartl from the BMWi for 15 minutes, who will discuss about sustainability. And then we are going to continue with 3 presentations from our speakers. Sven is going to start with transparency in supply chains, and Nathan is going to continue with challenges of traceability in Rwandan tin. And Mariana is going to conclude with use cases on IOTA for social impact. After the three presentations, we are going to have a short and panel discussion with all our speakers, alongside also Erik Somitsch from SAP, who is going to join us. And we have some questions prepared, and we will mix the questions from the audience with the questions that we have prepared. So feel free at any time during the event to post questions in the chat, and we will take them up either directly after the presentations of the participants or during the panel discussions, or the panelists, if your question is so urgent and interesting that they want to answer it right away, they might also contact you via chat and just respond to your question. This event is recorded, and I think we can get started with the official program. So a bit of background on our speakers. We have Mr. Andreas Hartl from BMWi, who is the head of division of artificial intelligence, data economy, and blockchain, and who will kick off with the keynote. We have Nathan Williams, who is the CEO and founder of Minespider. We have Sven Wittich from AFTS, who is the chief sales officer. And then we have Mariana de la Roche, who is a project lead at IOTA, and Erik Somitsch, who is a senior director for solution management in the agribusiness division of SAP. And without further ado, I am going to hand the word over to our first speaker, Mr. Andreas Hartl.
Ricardo, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at this panel and have the honors to give a keynote. Thanks especially to Birdchain and Berlin Partners for setting up this event. Unfortunately, I could not attend a bit earlier, so my keynote will be on this panel. I would like to reflect a little bit what happened in the previous years and what will be the outlook for blockchain policy, especially in Germany in the next couple of months and years, on the basis of the coalition treaty, and especially the links to sustainability. And maybe I can also share with you some insights of projects that we supported, and I think it's really open to the further developments which sustainability projects will be supported also in the future. So let me just start quickly with, the previous 4 years have been amazing, I think, for blockchain on several levels. We saw the establishment of INATBA on the international level. The European Union and some other member states of the European Free Trade Association established the European Blockchain Partnership and jointly operating the European blockchain services infrastructure. The OECD is working on principles and guidelines for governments, for administrations, but also for industry representatives. And at least in Germany, we set up a national blockchain strategy, the first comprehensive blockchain strategy in the world. As far as I know, only Australia has also a comprehensive encompassing blockchain strategy. Of course, other governments have given themselves blockchain strategy, but they're rather focused on some issues. Blockchain strategy we set ourselves was wide-ranging and quite horizontal. And I think we achieved a couple of things, reflecting the European Blockchain Partnership. We expanded the use cases. We added 3 use cases in 2019, I guess it was, or was it 20? I don't know. I think 19. And we are currently entering a new phase of maturity in the European Blockchain Partnership. And the previous 18 months, we had the co-chairmanship together with Portugal and Slovenia, and it was really great to see that we could achieve some progress in the work of all those groups involved, and the onboarding of the new use cases, and also currently see an international reach out when it comes to documentation. For instance, we have something in the loop together with Canada, so transatlantic blockchain credential blockchain coming up. So it's really exciting to see what happens, and I'm really looking forward to see what the new incoming co-chairmanship of France, Czech Republic, and Sweden will do to be in the lead for the EPP. And of course, Germany will remain an active part. I'm sure about that. And we also initiated some legal instruments in Germany, but also on European level, that are heavily discussed at the moment. And also projects, especially in the fields of energy, but also identity. I think you all have noticed that EID has become a top priority for Chancellor Merkel. She still is in office, caretaking, but of course we all know that she will leave. But you know, the issue really has gained momentum, and I'm sure that it will keep the momentum, and maybe it would even accelerate more. And I think that when you look into the current coalition treaty, which will be the basis for the next 4 years for the national government of Germany, there's some interesting projects explicitly mentioned. There's this horizontal stipulation which says that there will be investments in new technologies, and distributed ledger technologies are mentioned explicitly next to quantum, AI. And I think this really is a great technology family. As you mentioned, Ricardo, I'm also in charge of AI, and I see when it comes to the data economy, a lot of potential for, in a way, a collaboration of technologies. And I think I really see that there will be a priority when it comes to investment, public investment into technology. Blockchain will be a priority. And also some specific projects which are settled, which are agreed. For instance, there will be a study on the feasibility for a land registry. Doesn't sound like a moonshot, but whoever knows the public administration in Germany will maybe regard this as something like a moonshot. So I'm really excited to see how that will end up. But also in the area of financial services, to projects that are explicitly mentioned, and also the potential of blockchains and distributed ledger technologies. So I think it's really the time to become more concrete. And I think what also will be very important is that there are so many projects and initiatives in the coalition treaty for the modernization, for the almost renewal of the public administration and processes of the public federal administration. And I think that this really is an opportunity for blockchain solutions to show their maturity and to compete. That blockchain solutions can be the best solution. And this is really something where I hope that you as developers, you as providers will see an opportunity and will succeed. This is really something I would like to see. And of course, sustainability. I mean, this is another huge priority, also reflected, of course, in the partners of the new coalition. And I think at the moment we really cannot see to what extent this could end up in opportunities for blockchain-based registers or identity solutions for all the projects, for all the initiatives that come up. But of course, I mean, there is, for all digital technologies, this huge elephant in the room that, of course, you know, digital technologies rely on electricity. And this means electricity consumption. So we all have to bear in mind that while digital technologies and solutions as blockchain can be a solution, they're also a driver of what people see as an issue. I think what is very relevant to see there is that I know many prominent blockchains are based on proof of stake, which is comparably high in energy consumption, while proof of work is less energy consumptive. And currently we have the debate in Germany if proof of stake should be treated a bit differently when it comes to taxation. We as the federal government for economy and economic affairs and energy have that on our focus. We had that in the previous election term, and we have that now also. Sorry, I have some incoming calls that maybe do not bother you at me. Okay, and so bottom line is, I think the new coalition treaty gives a lot of homework for blockchain, but a huge deal of opportunities for blockchain. I would really love to see solutions from Berlin, from Germany, from Europe to succeed. Maybe to give you an impression what we currently are supporting, just some insights into blockchain and sustainability projects. So as I said, especially when it comes to energy, and this is also sometimes some of these projects are mentioned in our blockchain strategy. We have 4 projects running in the smart service world too. So we have something for the virtual large-scale storage for photovoltaic system operators. We have a project called Pebbles, a peer-to-peer energy trading based on blockchain. We are funding SMECS, SMECS, which is an innovation cooperation approach, including also blockchain for rather regionally active blockchain, energy producers. And I think maybe one of the most prominent is Syntec. There's a project, Grid for Mobility, a project that is a solution to integrate different grid bottlenecks in the distribution with the help of blockchain. So I think some very promising projects going on there. But also when it comes to the supply chain, I think this is another very attractive field of use case area where use case blockchain can play an important role. We have a project which is, so we means the government, this is then the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation. They're supporting projects in Ethiopia on agricultural supply chains. The colleagues from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research are funding in Singapore projects on value chains when it comes to unregulated products, especially. And also the circular economy. The colleagues from the Federal Ministry of Environmental Protection have a use case on sustainable blockchain technology for a digital product passport. And the last project, maybe it's called DigiChain. It's a funding scheme for resource efficient circular economy projects, especially when it comes to innovative product cycles. One example in aircraft construction, so very exciting what's happening there. So just some ideas what is currently funded. And I really see, again, large opportunity to showcase that blockchain can be part of the solution or the solution also for climate protection issues, for sustainability issues. So I would like to stop there, Ricardo, and really looking forward to the discussion and to the further progress we see next year. And hopefully you all stay healthy and maybe next year there will be a chance to meet in person again. Thank you from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Hartl, for this great presentation and for sharing your insights. If you have 1 or 2 more minutes, there were some questions.
Sure.
So one question I would like to throw in. I don't know if you're allowed to express your view on that, but there's a new coalition that is being formed, and the previous government did a very important milestone by establishing the first blockchain strategy, and that one was very, let's say, positive of sustainability use case, of energy related use cases. What's your take on the next 4 years? Do you think that the new coalition will continue with that path that has been initiated now 2 years ago, or will there be changes, or what's your view on that?
Changes can be something positive,
of course,
but to be very, very open, we still don't know. I mean, next week on Wednesday, the chancellor will be elected. Then the ministers will be inaugurated, and I think it will take some time to concretize the coalition treaty once we have real contact with the new leadership. My assumption, however, would be that the new coalition, and how I read the coalition treaty, is maybe let me phrase it a little bit pointy. In the previous coalition was not only a do tank, it was also a think tank. And I think the next coalition, as I see it, will concentrate more on the do tank thing. I think we had a lot of discussions on strategy, but I think where we need to accelerate, and I'm not keeping public administration out of it, we have to do more, we have to implement. I don't see really a necessity for a blockchain strategy update necessarily. I would really like to focus on let's do. I think that's also the spirit of startups to just start to have early minimum viable products and to just get things started. This is also the spirit when I read the coalition treaty for the renewal, for the modernization of public administrations. So I really don't know. Again, I would see that the next coalition will focus more on implementation than on strategy processes. But please don't get me wrong, those strategy processes were very important, and we would not stand where we are today without these processes. I was involved in 3 of them: a data strategy, blockchain strategy, AI strategy. Again, I don't see the need necessarily for an update of these strategies. I see the necessity for a focus on the implementation. That would at least be my advice to the new leadership.
Thanks a lot. Great insights. If you have 1 more minute, there was 1 more question.
Yeah, sure.
Which was a little bit outside of the sustainability space, but since we have the great opportunity of having you here, I would give the person the chance to ask it. So the question is, it would be great to get some insights from BMWi on the Gaia X project and how it combines with self-sovereign identity technology.
Wow. To be honest, this is a very detailed question, and I cannot give a proper answer. All I know is that blockchain plays an important role. As far as I know, maybe I'm not revealing any secrets, but the CTO of Gaia X, I think, is a blockchain supporter, maybe even a blockchain aficionado. So I think you don't have to tear down walls to get a blockchain footprint in Gaia X. And when it comes to identity, I know that there are, as I said, on several levels, initiatives going on, some better, some worse. I mean, some of you may have noticed this project regarding driver's license, I think with the best intentions, but there were some flaws. But when it comes to projects that are initiated by the Chancellery directly, or the self-sovereign identity projects that are supported by my ministry, I think that it will be very important. Also, seeing the current discussion on the EID regulation, I think that is currently under debate, the recast. For us, it's very important, and this is what we on also internal message. You cannot expect that all ID functionalities or solutions in the future will be based on blockchain. But what we need is that blockchain has a level playing field, and wherever blockchain is the best solution, it should have a chance and may succeed. But what will be the best technology, of course, left to the requirements that have to be fulfilled for the specific solution. So I really cannot give you a more detailed answer on the question, but I hope I could give you an impression of the circumventing things that go on around that. So
absolutely, thanks a lot. That makes total sense. So thanks a lot for the keynote and the answers, Mr. Hartl, and the closing words that each identity will be based on a blockchain. And with that, I thank you a lot. And we would now move over to the next speaker, and we hope to see you again next year at one of our sessions, and continue keeping in touch with you. So with that,
likewise, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. So with that, I would ask now the next speaker, Sven Wittich from AFTS, to start his presentations about supply chain traceability. Sven, the stage is yours.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, I will talk about transparency in supply chains, how it is possible, and why we are doing it. So, why it is important for us to bring transparency into supply chains. First of all, what are we doing? We are a blockchain-based track and trace platform, and we are tracking goods across the entire supply chain. So we are collecting a huge amount of data of the supply chain and of the products, of the raw materials, and you can use this data to optimize your supply chain and to create even more sustainable products. Because you have all your suppliers, you can see the route of the raw material. So you can maybe change from trucks to the train to create even less carbon. So you have a lot of options to optimize your products in general. With this data, you also can do better marketing as well, storytelling, and you can go more into the trust building of your company, because you're hiding nothing, and hiding nothing, be transparent, is the best way to generate trust into your product and in your brand as well. So why are we doing that? Supply chains are highly complex, and a lot of them are global. A lot of companies have various raw materials in the portfolio, and not all suppliers want to be transparent. So it's really difficult to get all your suppliers on board. On the other hand, the companies get pressure from the stakeholders, European Green Deal, the supply chain acts, especially in Germany. 2023, the Lieferkettengesetz, the German Supply Chain Act, is starting. And a lot of companies are not aware of it still today. And definitely the customer. A few years ago, it was important that a product was as cheap as possible. Then there was the hype of the certificates, fair trade, eco, all that kind of stuff. But now the customer wants to know more. The customer wants to know the whole ecological footprint of a product. So it's getting harder and harder for a company to be transparent enough. And this is difficult because of a lot of points in a company. Intransparent supply chains, of course, opposite interest and limited trust of the participants in the supply chains. You have a lot of product lines in each company. You have the greenwashing, and a big point is the trade secrets of each company. If you are transparent, fully transparent, your trade secrets may be transparent as well. And this is a huge point, especially B2B. So the first preparation for transparency is the status quo, the risk analysis, and the goal definition. We show the supply chain always with the SDGs. So we show every checkpoint of the supply chain which SDGs are supported. The non-target definition. And then we're starting with mapping the supply chain. This is the first step to have transparency in your supply chain. You need to know your supplier. And at this time, even smaller companies doesn't know the suppliers. Of course, tier 1, maybe tier 2, but tier 3, tier 9, it's a kind of a black box. So the features for transparency. The most important part, we think, is the track and trace system. So we track raw materials, so it's becoming dynamic. This is the best way to always have the actual suppliers and supply chain transparent. Another point is the mass balance. We monitor the volume of the goods in the supply chain. This is especially important for the smallest parts in the supply chain. For example, coffee. You put in, as a farmer, you put in 100 bags of coffee into the supply chain. And in the end, your end customer gets 90 bags of coffee out of the supply chain, and 10 get lost anywhere and nobody knows where. And with a track and trace system, you can exactly show where the 10 bags got lost, or this will not happen in the best case. We're using a digital twin on a blockchain. So we try to make it tamper-proof. We're using smart contracts to enable trust between all the participants in the supply chain. And the big part is the selective transparency, especially B2B. Selective transparency is important for the trade secret protection. You can use this device mobile. We create dashboards, of course, for analysis all the data, and we have a consumer app where you can show your transparency. We will have a close look later on. So how to use it? You can access from anywhere. We're using QR codes to fill in the data. So on your bags, on your products, on your raw materials, there are QR codes. You just need to scan in the QR code, and you need to fill in just a few data, and that's it. So it's really easy to use it. You can integrate into any system, and everything is automatic. The contact from supplier to their suppliers, the data integration, you can fill in your material lists. So we try to make it as simple as possible. As I said, we have a consumer app. So in the end, you got your QR code. You can put it in on your product. And if you have your smartphone right now, you can scan in this QR code we created. It's an example. So it's just showcase to see how it can look like in the end. You just need to go on with your camera, you click on it, and you jump directly into the supply chain. Then you have, it looks like a bit like this one. You can go down, and then you have the steps, the checkpoints. This is from an oil from Africa to Germany, and then you can open the checkpoints. You can see the collection area. You just need to click on the small icon. Then you see the collection area and the transaction of the blockchain as well, with all the details which are on the blockchain. So you have the fully transparent supply chain, and your end customer can. It's kind of a gamification who creates as much trust as possible. How to get started with it? Of course, sign up with AFTS. Use it with any system. You don't need extra hardware or stuff like that. Anywhere, anytime. Everything is automatically. You just need to fill in a few datas of your raw materials or your suppliers. And you can use it for the Lieferkettengesetz as well, because you can send the data to the authorities, to suppliers, to your B2B customers as well. Just a quick wrap up about AFTS. We're a startup from, of course, from Berlin, sustainability and blockchain. It's obvious that we are in Berlin. We have a strong connection to the Digital Business University and the Institute for Applied Blockchain. And thank you for your time. If you have any question, just drop me a mail or send me a LinkedIn or whatever. Ask Ricardo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sven. So I think the questions will come up in the panel. I see that just now one of the questions popped in that we can take right away. So one question is, how is the selective transparency achieved in AFTS? So if the supplier is not comfortable using a public blockchain, what is your answer?
At this time, we don't have a problem with suppliers who doesn't want to work with a public blockchain, because everyone we're talking with at the moment, at least, is try to showcase that they are sustainable, and the public blockchain is the best way to show that. The suppliers we are talking with using this blockchain and our tool to create an USP in the market. So this is a huge advantage for everyone in the supply chain. And to this point, we don't have any problems with a supplier who doesn't want to participate in the supply chain.
Thanks a lot. And then one quick question from my side. So there have been other companies that have been doing supply chain traceability similar to yours, and you founded the company like fairly recently, last year, as a spin-off. What was like the trigger to say now is the time to jump into the supply chain space? Was there like a specific trigger or a specific motivation why to do it last year and not next year or 3 years ago, for example?
Yeah, actually, we founded the company because of our first customer. We have a huge DAX company, and we did a workshop with the Institute for Applied Blockchain with them. And in this workshop, we had a talk about supply chain and transparency and all that stuff. I think it was two and a half years ago. And this was the idea of AFTS in this workshop. And then we continued to grow this idea. And we had a talk to a lot of companies in the market if the pain is there. So yeah, we created this company, I think, to the perfect point because of the Lieferkettengesetz as well. Yeah, it makes sense to do it now.
All right, thanks a lot. And with that, I would hand over to our next speaker, Nathan Williams from Minespider, who is going to talk about tin traceability in Rwanda. So without further ado, Nathan, stage is yours.
Thanks, everyone. Great to be here. I'm going to just set my timer so I don't go over time. And what I want to, when I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking to myself, this is a group that might be from a different world than I'm used to operating in. Like if you understand about blockchain, you've heard about supply chain. Usually the discussion is on transparency or on provenance. Where do my products come from? Under what conditions have they been produced? And the thing is, this is sort of the base level of understanding that we usually get into around supply chain. But what you start to see as you start to dig into a project is that there's a lot of different sub-problems underneath it. And what I was hoping to do with this project is talk a little bit about what we learned about tracking tin from Rwanda with our partner Minespider, and about how this can be expanded to other use cases and that fall into this supply chain domain. Okay, so let's start with what we're doing. Blockchain design. Most people have heard of blockchain design. Everyone adds some data at each point of the chain. It's not the rocket science. We've been around since 2017. Our design was, again, on a public blockchain. It's a second layer blockchain, and this is the way that we did transparency. Is we didn't want to have sort of a private blockchain viewing area. What we did is we arrange data into what we call materials passports. And we divided it into 3 different layers of data by visibility. We encrypt each different layer with symmetrically. And then the keys to those layers, we asymmetrically encrypt with the public key of the data owner. So this allows us to give permission on a public blockchain to different areas of data without having a centralized password control. Okay, so this was sort of the original idea of Minespider. Now, as we got going forward, we realized that, sorry, I have trouble with this full screen mode here. We realized that a user interface was very important to our customers because most people in the supply chain aren't blockchain experts. Our original design was also a digital twin system, but it was sort of early days. It was 2017, and we had the requirement of everyone needing an Ethereum wallet or MetaMask to get started. And this was just too complicated. So again, we moved to something very similar where we ended up using a QR code access system, and the idea was to create materials passports that could be linked together that would share data on carbon emissions, on recycling information, and downloadable documents so that people could cross borders and demonstrate sustainability. You know, this is all normal things. Now, when we were started, we were on a compliance focus. So we were looking at what was needed to export from Rwanda. You had a EU conflict minerals questionnaire. You had supply chain history, provenance, data chain of custody, ICGLR certificate. These are all documents that would normally be on paper. And so our sales pitch was mostly, how do you reduce the cost of trust and how do you more easily facilitate cross-border transactions using this blockchain? If we could provide value to the upstream supplier, the mines and the smelters, then it would be easier to onboard them and to get the data. They wouldn't see us as pure cost, but they would see us as a way of better marketing their materials. And so then the downstream that would receive them would then get the benefit of the transparency. So this is what we ended up doing with Luna Smelter. We had Google as a big supporter. They've been our supporters since the early days. And so what we did in a first phase with Luna Smelter in Rwanda is we started putting QR codes on finished ingots. Now these QR codes, people would scan them and you would have the downloadable documents, and it would have all of the documents just in a digital format that they would need to export. Later on, what we're launching now with them is a mine to smelter chain of custody. So this is a little different, that it starts with, again, the smelter. They conduct a due diligence on the mines they want to buy from, and then give them tags that they can affix to bags of material, and then they conduct a due diligence and a chain of custody to make sure that the metal that comes out of that mine ends up back at their station. What this does is it reduces the cost, because right now most people in Rwanda are required to use a third party, which is very, very expensive. And so the question is, how can you reduce the cost on the miners? So this is sort of our background. And this is what it looks like. So we're tracking tin slag, we're tracking tantalum, we're tracking tin ingots as they move across the value chain. Now, where I think this might be interesting to all of us is when we start to think about different use cases. You know, we see that there's a movement here, especially in the financial world. People are pushing for more sustainable products, sustainable mining. And to make the green transition, we need about 3 billion tons of new metal that hasn't been mined yet. So when we're starting to track metals, we have to ask, okay, what are the big categories of challenges that we can address in the supply chain beyond merely provenance? And so I've put them into categories, and I'll go through a couple of examples of each category. So first, what are the issues in critical raw materials? So we have access to critical raw materials. So right now we're seeing geopolitical problems with industries not necessarily having access to cobalt, to lithium, to battery materials, and the future operability of the industry is going to be dependent on securing adequate supply. Then you have issues surrounding the extraction of these materials. So are they being done responsibly? What does that look like? What does responsible mean? Then you have the trade of critical raw materials like how to facilitate that, make it more efficient. Then responsibility, what responsibility means, and recycling and circularity, because circular economy is a huge issue. So start with access to critical raw materials. You have issues around national interest. You know, there's if you're ever around the battery materials field, you know that China pretty much has a monopoly. Europe is trying to secure their access to their raw materials. You've got monopolies, both state-owned and non-state. And for this green transition, the danger is that the price is just going to go way up into the sky. And so what we found even during the pandemic is that individual companies would have their supply chains disrupted. And because what happens if all of your material is coming through Wuhan, China, and then there's an outbreak of a pandemic that starts there, then you end up having supply disruptions. So knowing where your material is coming from can help you make sure that you're diversified. It can be an important tool in the belt. Now, extraction. Do you want to mine in your backyard? Does anybody? But if there's a mine in Africa and it's far away, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily responsible. So when you have carbon emissions, when you have toxic metals that need to be stored somewhere safely, how are those being handled? These are an externality for companies, and usually you will have companies at arm's length from them. It's only by connecting the companies to their downstream that they see it as, this is our risk and we need to make sure it's managed. Here's an example of this. If you were to view this city and zoom in on, this is just on Google Maps, You would not know really where it is, but it's Kigali, sorry, not Kigali, it's Kolwezi in the DRC. 70% of the world's cobalt comes from here. It's in most companies' supply chains, but they can't prove it. So until this is connected to a company's supply chains, they treat it as an ESG issue. We want to do some nice work in this area and help them. But when we can connect these companies, then they can say, well, this is a direct risk to us. We see that this is a nice little city that people live in. And then we see a mine, and if you zoom out, you'll see the mine is the size of the city. And if the minerals are here, might they not be on the other side of the lake too? So what happens? People dig in their backyards. This is where child labor comes in. And what happens when this mining company wants the minerals that are on the other side of the lake? This is DRC. Land ownership is a little more tenuous around there. Do they go in with machine guns or do they pay them? Responsibility doesn't just mean what's happening today. It can mean what will happen in the future, and making sure people are accountable is a key part of that responsibility. So responsibility issues can involve human rights, child labor, carbon emissions, end of life, and expanding our idea of what responsibility is can be very helpful. And of course, an immutable record and a trace supply chain can help with all of this. Trade facilitation. The reason I want to bring this up is because it's still, even today, hard to justify a business case to a lot of companies. Even if they're interested in traceability, justifying a business case can be very, very challenging when you have upper management that is only focused on the bottom line. And so riding on efficiency and trade facilitation and better finance can help get the project through. So that's just a basis to give you an idea of how we can apply this. It's not just about provenance. It's not just about tracking. There are a lot of sub-problems that have business cases and that have very important uses. But at its core, you need to make it simple for companies to get started, because we are the blockchain people and they are not. They shouldn't have to become experts to get started. Just get the information, put it in a QR code, and be done with it. And that's what's needed. Sort of like you and I don't really understand how the internet works on a day-to-day basis on a technical level, but we use it all the time. That's where blockchain needs to go. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nathan, for that very informative presentation. So I think more questions will come up in the panel. So I suggest we move on directly with Mariana, who is going to continue talking about a bit of a different angle, sustainability use cases on IOTA. Mariana, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then here we go. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon to discuss actually and to learn about the potential of blockchain for sustainability, especially in the supply chain. You already know my name. I'm Mariana Roche. I'm the lead project manager of the IOTA Foundation, and I'm also the co-chair of the social impact group of INATPA. And different to the presentations of Nathan and Sven, I will focus not on a particular case, but on highlighting the potential of DLT for sustainability with different use cases. And I would like to start saying that with DLT, we can potentially address some of the most pressing challenges of our time, including climate change, poverty, inequality, hunger, and food waste. So to provide you with a better idea about how DLT can benefit sustainability, I would like to focus on some of the projects that we are implementing with the IOTA Foundation, as they are a clear example of DLT use cases for sustainability. And for the purpose of this presentation and this panel, I especially selected 4 use cases that are somehow connected to supply chain as well. So the first project is the DJIT. And like many other businesses, and maybe as Nathan also mentioned before, the mining industry needs to go greener. So the DJIT project develops and integrates oracles with a centralized industrial IoT platform used in the mining industry to securely export trusted data across stakeholders, including the public. So having access to trusted and real-time machine data as well as environmental data allows for timely planning, as well as reaction and risk mitigation and management. And it also increases the mining sector efficiency and safety. So basically, this project intends to create digital twins of mine in European countries to monitor raw material production and the mine's environmental impact. The idea at the end is to improve the efficiency and sustainability of mining operations in an immutable and transparent way, with a process and technology that can be later on replicable to other regions. The second project that I would like to share with you today is the DMRB. DMRB stands for Digital Monitoring, Reporting and Verification. And currently, the MRB practices for carbon emission in more than 90% of the cases are done analog, which requires in-person visit to audit. And the digital solutions we use until now are not that much better because of the lack of appropriate security and trust, which reduces the utility of the data due to the lack of confidence. So investors, sellers, buyers, and other stakeholders are limited from participating in climate markets and climate finances without secure, immutable, and reliable sources of data available in real time. So the DMRB project, which we are implementing in cooperation with Climate Check and is funded by the Canadian government, is working in climate monitoring to guarantee the veracity of the data utilized by the climate researchers and institutions, relying on data that cannot be faked. So basically, the DMRB project combines 4 different features. The first one is standardized methodologies and protocols, for example, using the smart contracts to automate requirements in the digital MRB solutions. The second one is online platforms and knowledge hive to engage more stakeholders to develop and harmonize the MRB standards in an open and transparent way. The third one is a combination of different digital technologies such as DLT, AI, and sensors to automate digital MRB standards. And so, for example, switching from household surveys for efficiency energy consumptions to IoT sensors. And the last one is generating marketplaces to connect and support data owners, data providers, and the users. The third one is SUSE, which stands for Secure Sensors Platform for Smart Energy Networks. And it's a research project that has been implemented in collaboration with the IOTA Foundation, some German companies, research facilities, and network operators. The main goal of this project is the conceptualization of a scalable and affordable solution for reliable and secure data transmissions and processing in sensors network, in particular in metering applications. So today, energy suppliers are faced with the challenges of sharing the energy transitions towards a more reliable, secure, and climate-friendly energy supply at affordable places, of course. And to tackle all of these challenges, the partners within the SUSE collaboration are working on a technical solution that provides a secure and scalable foundation for infrastructure applications through the state-of-art communications technology. So due to the high degree of innovation in the field of networked sensor systems with applications in the smart meter center, and actually like the involvement or qualified partners representing the entire value chains, the SUSE project was selected for the Applied Non-Nuclear Research funded by the Germany's Federal Minister for Economy and Energy. SUSE is a really ambitious project to reform actually the whole energy sector. And last but not least, also because I think that I'm running out of time, is the Trade Logistics Information Pipeline, also we call it TLIP for shorter. And it's a cooperation between the IOTA Foundation and the Trademark East Africa. The Trademark East Africa is an organization working on improving trade conditions in East Africa in order to grow the prosperity in the region. So the project aims to establish an infrastructure for the exchange or guarantee data between government agencies and traders in cross-border processes. So TLIP is basically is an integrated solution that ensures that the information is shared from the source by providing visibility and traceability in the trade process, avoiding tedious paperwork processes, cutting costs and delays, as well as removing the need to rely on third parties. The project has really a great potential to increase the competitiveness of East African goods in the international market and thus create jobs and improve the livelihoods in the region. So these 4 projects are, at least for me, clear examples that showcase the potential of DLT for sustainability in 4 different industries: mining operations, climate monitoring, energy, the energy industry, and the supply chain as an industry itself, but also in regards to the other 3 projects. Currently at IOTA, we are working in 12 projects that we have under implementation. That also includes the mobility and smart cities industry, which because of time, I don't think that I have the opportunity to present today. But here are my contact details, so feel free to approach me if you want information in regards to one of these projects or the other projects that I couldn't mention today. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Mariana. So I think that was a great 360-degree overview on the different projects that you're working on. Now we have the next 30 minutes to go over some questions. So to the audience, if you have questions that you would like to ask to the panelists, just post them in the chat and we are going to take them up as well as possible. And I would like to just kick off with a question to Nathan that the others can also comment on. That is, so in the whole mining industry, let's say that in the last years, there was the EU conflict minerals regulation that probably helped in the adoption of blockchain for traceability. And now there is a new regulation that is coming up that was already mentioned in most of the presentations, the German supply chain law. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on how do you think the supply chain law is going to affect your space in the mining industry. Do you see any impact, how that will influence your industry and potentially also accelerate or decelerate the adoption of blockchain in that area?
Who wants to go first?
I suggested you go first.
Of course, any regulation that requires companies to share information is going to accelerate this, the adoption of this. I think that what we've seen, though, is that there are factors that are beyond just companies being forced, right? So in the past few years, the bigger factors for companies adopting traceability have been wanting to get better traction, get more efficient, get better compliance, better information to their customers. And it's usually been downstream customers demanding it more than regulators enforcing it. When a regulator brings in a regulation like the supply chain law or the conflict minerals law, it's usually trying to codify things in order to protect the big companies. It's not trying to force big companies into things, usually. So it'll be that the big companies are like, okay, we don't want to end up on the news next to child slaves. What can we do so that we know we're doing enough? And so then the regulation comes in, and so then that makes it clear, and usually this ends up working together. I think that the supply chain law, they could do a lot more with it, because I think it only has, certain size companies are affected, and certain and only down to like tier 1 in the supply chain or tier 2 or something like that. Don't remember, but it's not like they have to know tier 8. But starting somewhere is better than not starting. And it's always easier to accelerate the adoption after you've got some sort of base requirements.
This is Eric, if I may. I think I'm obviously not an expert in the mining business, but if I look at the CPG and especially food and agri space, Nathan, I think what you just said, it's like, so far it was more consumers or customers demanding information rather than regulators forcing companies to go down the traceability or trackability stream. So I think that's just the same in the food business, where especially consumers are asking for information. And I think now with the German supply chain regulation, I think this will only increase now, and I think it's now, you know, it's in the interest of companies to show that they can differentiate and prove that they are able to trace everything all the way back, and not so much really, you know, that I'm actually following some new regulation, some law.
Maybe one follow-up question, like for Sven, where I would like to hear the thoughts in the context of the supply chain law, is there's a lot of traceability solutions out there, like with blockchain or without blockchain, right? And do you think that because of, and that's just a hypothesis that I have, because of the fact that the supply chain law puts liability on companies, that the whole concept of immutable proof and having like data that cannot be modified will become more important, and the supply chain law specifically will help traceability solutions using blockchain versus traceability solutions using other technologies?
I think so, yes, because what we have in our discussions with companies, it's always like the Lieferkettengesetz, the Supply Chain Act, is a law, and a law is in first place, it's very important for a company to prove all the regulations they need to prove. And if you have a tamper-proof solution, I think this is for a lot of companies a good way to show all the requirements in a tamper-proof way, and I think that will push the area.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question that came from the audience that I think fits right now into the whole supply chain discussion, which is most companies have complex ERP systems like SAP and different master data. How can we achieve that companies can work with digital twins in an efficient way? Like, do we need standards for material master data and for companies with supply chain to communicate with each other?
That's a good question, and you know, since I'm from SAP, I'll comment on it with, you know, my 2 cents at least, because like 3 years ago we started working on solutions in the space, especially when it comes to end-to-end supply chain traceability. And you know, how do you use information that sits in all these ERP systems, and how can it be shared between the different participants, and you know, how can you do this efficiently? And we've done, you know, work groups with customers and non-customers, and it appears that if you would try to force everyone down the road of a harmonized master data scheme, you'll probably never get there. So you have to come up with something more intelligent or very flexible, and instead of trying to force everyone to agree to sort of scheme. So you know, that might work in some industries or in some segments where you have really few players which can agree to that. But if you think, for instance, of the food supply chain, there's just so many companies. If you want to achieve anything, then you need to find whatever the solution is, whether it's blockchain based or non-blockchain based, but you need to find flexible ways so that companies can still share the information, even though they may have not agreed on a certain you know, data, master data or whatever data scheme.
Thanks, Eric. Maybe as a follow-up question to that, since you mentioned food supply chains, what are some of the recent developments that you see with regards to sustainability and the potential use of blockchain for food supply chains?
Yeah, so in the especially in the food supply chain, I think there's one trend that we are all consumers. Everyone here, whether we are in the tech business or not, at the end of the day, we are also consumers, and so many of us can probably relate to the fact that more and more consumers are asking for this kind of transparency, where you want to know, okay, where is my food coming from, what was used to produce the food, and so on and so forth. And that that's a trend that you see in the first world, the rich countries, since quite a while, where people can afford to spend more money for food items that come from sources which they trust. But this is also now changing really quickly in in many other countries. So this becoming more of a global trend, because also in these countries that we call in Germany Schwellenländer, not sure what the English term for it is. Food safety, it's maybe not so much about sustainability always, but food safety is becoming a huge concern. And so there's a big trend also from consumers to understand more, where is everything coming from, and is it safe? And also sustainability is becoming more of a concern there. And then in addition to that, what we definitely also see on the consumer side, and therefore also on the retailer side, is many people are becoming more and more aware of the environmental and also socio-economic impacts of the food or any other item that they consume. Child labor, are farmers, plastic pickers, what have you, are they paid fairly? All these kinds of questions are really becoming of very big interest to many consumers. And so that's a big trend that we also see in the sustainability space. And for with that background in mind, what we definitely see is that more and more CPG companies are now interested in, okay, what can I do to prove that this is not just greenwashing, but I really care, and I want to treat the farmers and whoever is at the very beginning of the supply chain, for instance, that they are, for instance, treated fairly. So the trend is going to more towards, okay, can I differentiate by providing that kind of proof that I can really always go all the way to the beginning of the supply chain, and that I'm also acting locally where where things are sourced from, to really make this a better planet.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Sven, do you maybe want to comment also on that, since I think you also work in a similar or food supply chain area? Do you have any thoughts to share on what Eric just explained?
I'm totally on the same page. I think it's more and more important for companies to show the customers that they are sustainable and where the food is coming from. And not only from the perspective of the plantation. You have all the fair trade and all the certifications from the farmers, but the whole way is important, the whole supply chain, the whole ecological footprint, and it's getting more and more. I think it's important for companies to find a way to share all these information with the customer, and it's not important if it's blockchain based or not. It's important that they are doing it. This is the important part. Blockchain is a good way, of course, but the important part is that they are doing it. And I think the Lieferkettengesetz and European Green Deal and everything what's going on right now is supporting that. And I think it shows that we are on a good direction, I think.
Thanks, Sven. So one follow-up question that I had for all of you is, so the topic of environmental impact came up several times now, and of reducing that. So one thing that blockchain, of course, does is immutability, proofs, traceability. How do you think this can help to mitigate the CO2 impact that, for example, production supply chains, be it in the food industry or in the mining industry or in other industries, can have?
It's sort of hard to manage what you don't know and what you can't track. And having access to carbon emissions information, water use information, chemical hazards, recycling information can help you as a consumer or as a company make better decisions. The example I often like to use is that if you go to the store and you want to buy a phone, generally you would have, you know, a couple of options to choose from, but it's not like there's a sustainability report that says, you know, one uses 50% child labor and the other uses 48%. You know, that's not something that you can really gauge. But companies have the same problem, right? If they're buying metal off of a market or from a supplier, they don't know if one is better than the other. Regarding any sort of environmental impact, regarding any sort of human rights impact, they have to make their decision primarily based on price. And usually they'll have a separate department that's tasked with, okay, just vet the suppliers as best you can. And that group usually has very different budget available. When you have transparency and when you have a connection of what work has been done at each layer of the supply chain, you can start to make better decisions. You can start to say, okay, we don't want this material or this supplier because they're not using the most efficient process, or we want a better process, or, you know, you can start to take that calculus into account in your purchasing decisions and give it as a mandate to the purchasing department. So that's generally how traceability will work in this situation.
Yeah, I think I would agree. You know, as you said, Nathan, it's difficult. This is a difficult space, whether it's on blockchain or, you know, any other system to trace CO2, for instance. But to your question, Ricardo, maybe, you know, this can be used in intelligent ways, and I think we're at the very beginning here. So at SAP, we are investing in something that we call green token, where companies can start to basically pass on the right to the next level in the supply chain, to say that, you know, if I have, for instance, to make it a bit more tangible than with CO2, but if you say, okay, I have palm oil, for instance, you know, if you have a gallon or a liter or whatever of palm oil, there's typically no way to know how much in that gallon of palm oil, how much is from a sustainable versus non-sustainable source. But because everything is getting commingled anyway, and, you know, so it's similar with you know, if you want to track, you know, if I taken out CO2 of the atmosphere to produce something, and therefore, you know, have done good. I mean, that's very difficult. But if you can manage to say, okay, I have the certification that my palm oil is from sustainable sources, or I have certifications that in the production of whatever I do, I'm actually, you know, carbon positive. So I'm taking carbon out of the atmosphere, and I can pass that to the next level in the supply chain, and make it such that it's you know, it's believable by the consumers or the regulators or whatsoever. Then, you know, I think this is a potential way to make this happen and make this more transparent in the future. And so we have this green token concept where, you know, if you have a certain certification, then whatever you do, you can then pass on tokens to the next guy in the chain, who then can say, okay, you know, here I have proof that this is coming from the right source. And even though, you know, in my 1 gallon of palm oil, not everything is coming from a sustainable source, I can at least say that 50% is from a sustainable source. So that, you know, just as an example.
Yeah. And I think the most important part is the transparency, of course, and collecting all the data. But which is very difficult for companies is to analyze this data. There are various risks in a supply chain. You can have raw material from a certain area, but you need to analyze this area. Is there some kind of deforestation maybe, or do they use childs on the fields? So you need to collect the data, you need to analyze the data, you need to do a risk analysis, you need to find partners to maybe do control on the field. So there are various risks, and it's difficult for companies to really find sustainable products. It's not only the transparency you need.
Makes sense. Thanks a lot. So if we stay with the topic of CO2 and climate change, and we zoom out a little bit from supply chains, I wanted to ask Mariana more generally, how do you think that blockchain, or the role of blockchain, can generally play to enhance the impact of sustainability, respectively climate action programs in particular?
Well, I kind of will repeat like a couple of things as you, all of you just mentioned. So, well, if you have like a fully trusted, immutable, interoperable data system implemented with the blockchain, of course, like the speed of automation innovation will be improved. So not only one part of the supply chain, but actually over the total supply chain. And this also enables like new business model for like fostering the circular economy. So basically, I think that like what we like, or like what I've been hearing right now is that like most of the data used to measure impact is limited to certain aspects of the supply chain, such as the material productions, for example. And this actually fails to calculate the real impact, and other measurements such as carbon footprint of production and transportation are not taken into account. I do think that like blockchain like provides this possibility of collecting and analyzing like data from all the aspects of the supply chain, so we can actually digitalize the total life cycles of the products and the supply chain. And these solutions support the enterprises not only to track and optimize the real impact they are generating in society, but also to facilitate the process of manufacturing like more sustainable products, because like the whole understanding of the supply chain is there. So in the case, for example, of the DMRB project, that is one of the projects that I presented before, these solutions, like solutions based on DLT, enhance the transparency, accuracy, efficiency, trust, and value of climate data through digital solutions for the collection, calculation, reporting, and assurance, which is what you just mentioned. So solutions using DLT, such as the DMRT project, represent like a shift from like manual collection and assessments of the data to automate solutions, providing validated data sets that generate trust and can drive more investment into the sector, as well as avoiding greenwashing.
Makes sense. One follow-up question, just generally out of curiosity, which is IOTA specific. Have you, as the IOTA Foundation, seen an uptick in interest in IOTA alongside with the whole sustainability discussion around blockchain specific, like blockchain energy consumption? Is that something that sustainability within blockchain usage that has impacted you in the last few months?
I don't think that in the last few months, but it's also like something that I think has helping us a lot, especially with the projects that we implement with the European Commission, especially those that are connected to the Horizons 2020. And is that like, I posted a couple of blog posts, you can check there, that are like providing like all the technical information, but we don't have proof of work. So like our users are like not different. We don't have like miners and users that are the same. So like our consensus mechanism is completely different. So in comparison to other blockchains, like our energy consumptions are lower. And also IOTA allows you to have like zero fees transactions. So it's just like we have like separate transactions that can be value or data transactions, which for most of the use cases can be really useful. And also, I don't know how everyone is familiarized about IOTA, but I can share a couple of blog posts and more information. You have my contact details, but we don't work like technically with blockchain. So we have like kind of a second generation, that is the DAG, that is a new kind of DLT. And because of that, like our scalability is faster. Like we have like major number of transactions that we can approve from second in comparison to like regular blockchain. So I do think that is like for certain like use cases, it's more scalable and sustainable to use IOTA. And I'm not saying this just because I'm part of the foundation, but I really believe in what we're doing. And yep.
Thanks, Mariana. So since we have just a few minutes left, so if the audience has any questions, feel free to shoot them. And in the meantime, since we are at the Blockchain in Use conference in the sustainability track, I would like to ask each of you to just share one use case for blockchain in sustainability, one or two use cases that for you are already essentially implemented today that show how blockchain can help sustainability.
Ricardo, if you want, I can go first. So one of the projects we have done in the past is with a company called BMWi Foods. They are a seafood company from the US, primarily in the tuna business, and they came to us because they wanted to establish a way how they can prove to their suppliers, I'm sorry, not suppliers, to their consumers, that the tuna that they're selling in the US is coming from sustainable sources. And sustainability here really means that the tuna is not caught with big trawlers and big nets where you have a lot of bycatch. And where you're basically you're catching too much tuna. So so they've worked with their supply chain to get them all on a private permissioned blockchain, which we provide through a solution we call material traceability. Where everyone basically in the supply chain is sharing the information where the tuna is coming from. It starts with small fishermen on Indonesian islands. They go out with the long-tail boats every day and catch tuna basically with just line fishing. And then they bring their catch to shore, and from there on, it will be the tuna will be tracked all the way to the consumer in the US, whether it's in supermarkets or also in restaurants where they're also selling the tuna. So this is more tuna steaks, not your tuna fish can, but they are also planning to do the same on the canned tuna side. So. Yeah, clearly this had a pure sustainability driver behind what they were doing, and obviously, as I said earlier, this is going back to the notion of you're trying to differentiate because you want to show that you can actually trace all the way to the source. And in their case, BMWi Foods, they're actually working with the small villages on these islands where they are funding schools and are trying to see that the children are actually getting good education and are actually not going out every day on the boats to help fishing and so on. And another project I wanted to quickly mention, which Ricardo, you of course know of, is we have done a pilot project with Melita, where Melita is for some specialty coffee they're selling. They are now with the use of the same solution and barcoding technology that ScanTrust provides, are able to put barcodes on coffee packages where they can also track all the way back to the smallholder farmers in certain countries, because this coffee is specialty coffee and doesn't get mixed in big silos and what have you, but they're really keeping the bags of coffee intact until it reaches the roastery. And so yeah, that's another example where sustainability and proving your efforts as a company were the main drivers for those projects.
Thanks, Eric.
So as we are mainly in the food area as well, we have a pilot project, or we are setting it up now. It's a bit like your tuna project, because we're doing it with a company who's making sushi. And here we have more or less the same. We have the tuna and the salmon and all the fish. You need to prove that they are from sustainable sources. So I think this is a great one. And we have baobab. Baobab is something you can't do baobab on a plantation. You need to collect them free. And in some areas, it's forbidden to collect baobab. So it's a bit like the same requirements you have you have with a fish. So you need to prove where the baobab fruits are from, that you collect them from areas which are not forbidden. And you have the childs working on some plantations. So you have on the supply chain, on the baobab supply chain, you have more or less every SDG you need. So I think this is a good one to show the sustainability and the proof of sustainability with the blockchain.
Nathan, Mariana, who wants to go next?
Go for it, Mariana.
I kind of already spoke about 4 projects, so I don't know what else to add in short. So Nathan, I will pass it to you.
Sure. I'll give you the specifics on one project that I think is really interesting. So in the metal supply chain, you've got a bunch of problems with due diligence and child labor and funding, conflict, armed group funding, things like that. And what we found when we went down into Africa is that a number of countries are using a paper-based solution. Now, I would never say that they're a cartel or a mafia, but other people have noted that it made it very expensive for the miners, and that some of the tags end up turning up on black markets, and there's all sorts of craziness that goes down there. And so we started working and saying with some local partners as well as some upstream partners in the government to say, is it possible that the people buying the material can conduct their own due diligence without making use of this existing system? And so we developed a tool where they would conduct the due diligence, then we would have a chain of custody, and it would drastically reduce the costs on all of the people involved. So our thought on the matter was, and it comes down to sort of a philosophy, is that all of the end-to-end traceability is very useful as a stepping stone, but if that's the extent of the project, if we track metal from mine to end table and that's it, then it's greenwashing. Greenwashing is when the project stops. And so we thought it was better to incentivize more people to onboard to a system, even if we collected less secure data or were operating in sort of a wider reach, because then you have a broader basis on which to incentivize people to be responsible. Okay, and this just to give sort of the background of this, the reason that these countries are using this system is because ever since the supply chain laws were passed in the US, which were the precursor to the OECD requirements in the European law, the big downstream electronics brands and automotive brands put a lot of pressure on trying to make sure they knew where their metals were coming from. And the problem is that the laws were written to require them to know that they weren't sourcing from Congo. So what does this do? It puts pressure on the companies to try and switch. And so you de facto are saying, all right, we're just not going to buy from Congo. So what does that do? That means that you're hurting the people that you're trying to help. You're saying, oh, we don't want to fund this civil war that's killing 1 million people. And so we're just not going to buy from you. And so then you've got, what, a couple 100 million people that don't have a living anymore. And so you hurt the people you're trying to help. And then they end up going into town and seeing, okay, well, I'm paying, my taxes, I'm sourcing responsibly using the system, and it costs me, 10, 15% of the value of the metal, and I'm not getting fair price. But then someone in town is willing to pay me a 30% money laundering bonus to sell illegally to them. What am I going to do? And so that's why we were thinking, if we can reduce the cost and get a system that has maybe wider adoption and puts the onus on the people that are actually buying, then maybe we can increase the overall sustainability. And this is why responsibility and sustainability are such difficult topics, because they not only incorporate the technology side and how we track material, but it's also the policy side. And every problem that we face today is the unintended consequence of a solution that we tried to a problem we faced yesterday. And so we just got to be careful to always be moving forward and seeing, okay, what are the unintended consequences of the last solution, and how can we fix that?
Can I jump in on that?
Sure. 1 or 2 more minutes left.
We have what, sorry?
1 or 2 more minutes left.
Oh, great. So this, I speak super fast. So this actually just gave me a nice opportunity to just talk about something that we have been doing within ATPA. So we conducted a survey last year and we collected information over 69 projects working in blockchain projects trying to achieve sustainable development goals. And what is super interesting about this service is we consolidate everything in a report that was published in September this year. And basically the report concluded that basically three things. One of them was that there is not alignment among the projects in how they're measuring impact or what they even consider as impact. And because of this, there's difficulty in accessing funds to scale or implement the project. And of course, there were challenges in regards to the interoperability among the different protocols. So what I found really interesting is if we don't understand what is social impact, or we don't understand how to measure impact, we don't even know which kind of impact we are creating. And impact can go positive or negative. So any kind of actions coming from both public or private sector will generate an impact in society and the communities where the project is implemented. And that's why it's so important to actually create an alignment in what we as the sector are understanding on social impact and how we are going to measure. So we are actually working on that within ATPA social impact group in creating a unified framework for measuring impact, but not only impact in one dimension, but actually understand the different dimensions of impact, gender, climate, sustainability, infrastructure, all of this, because one project can just I think that was Sven who has the different SDGs that one project is actually affecting. So this is the case of all the different projects. So actually if you or anyone attending is interested on the topic, please get in contact, because we are looking for more points of view on how we can unify this the way in measuring impact.
Those are great closing words. So I think we're at the end of the panel and the presentations. It was a really great discussion. Thanks a lot, everybody, for your input. And to summarize, so we need to find ways to measure impact better, and at the same time reduce costs and have a positive business case, and then everybody's going to jump on sustainability use cases, hopefully in the next 5 years. So that's your homework to do. Find solutions and areas where your products are going to fit to get more adoption. So it was a pleasure to be here with everybody. And the webinar is recorded and will be published on our YouTube channel. And with that, it's beer o'clock now. So everybody enjoy your Friday evenings and have a great weekend. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.